Welcome to another episode of Productive Disruption. I'm your host, Molly McGowan Gorsuch, and I'm the Director of Client Engagement at Rhodes Branding. Today's guests are Marie Russell and Trinette Marquis. Marie is the Director of Communications, Family Engagement, and Outreach at Turlock Unified School District in California and was named the 2021-2022 Communicator of the Year by CalSPRA, which is the California state chapter of the National School Public Relations Association. Trinette is Executive Director of CalSPRA and serves as an instructor for the CalSPRA Academy courses, which we're going to get into. Today, Marie and Trinette are going to talk about last month's attendance awareness campaign in Turlock USD that Marie developed using strategy she learned from Trinette through a CalSPRA course. Marie and Trinette, thank you so much for being here with me today.
Happy to be here. Excited to be talking about this.
Me too. So that strategy I mentioned is the development of a communication plan, correct?
Yes.
This was Marie's first time building a communication plan, and we're going to get into how she found this best practice beneficial in guiding the campaign. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of all that, let's get an overview of Attendance Awareness Month. Marie and Trinette, why do school districts focus on attendance awareness during the month of September?
I don't know the origin for when and why it is in September. I assume it has something to do with, school starting and wanting to get off on the right foot. But many school districts, if not all school districts in September, are usually having some type of attendance focus. We have utilized something called Attendance Works in the past, and they have a lot of sample campaigns that we've utilized to promote attendance.
I think Marie pretty much covered it. I think although California schools start much earlier for the most part, these days we start anywhere between like the second week of August, and then the latest starting schools are the first week of September. But I think at some point we focused on September because that's when most of the schools were starting.
Right.
Yes, I know regionally, at least here in North Carolina, there was always a big push because school started around, August, but then they might see a decline shortly thereafter. So that's a little different this year. So Marie, with the pandemic, I know attendance awareness campaigns were pushed to the side during the height of COVID, since so many students had to miss school because of COVID-related reasons. So why is it important now in 2022 to revamp the campaign?
I feel like all of us are resetting after the pandemic and trying to get back to normal. And obviously, attendance, for a variety of reasons during the pandemic, took a hit. A lot of people were obviously sick. There were issues with, obviously a time you couldn't even come to school because schools were closed. To us, it was important to get back, as far as all the things that we're doing to get to a return to normalcy, is to get back to our usual, attendance emphasis that we always did in September. So you're correct that we have not done a campaign in September for at least 2 years that I can remember. But we were ready to get back to, again, all those things that we did before the pandemic.
And I know a little bit about the messaging that was part of it, right? Because in the past, in the last 2 years, the state really didn't want districts to incentivize attendance.
Right. So it's kind of, you're trying to thread a needle between promoting attendance while at the same time not creating an incentive to send kids to school while they're sick. And so even in the current CDPH guidance, it still says, don't do that. Don't incentivize kids coming to school while sick. So that's fine, except as all of us are experiencing, we have a lot of kids who beyond illness are missing school and chronically absent. We had a large percentage of our students over the past 2 years who are chronically absent. As a matter of fact, if I can look at my data here, for last school year, let me make this a little bigger, over 30% of our students were chronically absent. So attendance percentage less than 90% of the school year. So we knew it was important that those kids need to come to school. Obviously, all of us are facing achievement gaps, learning gaps, and the best place for those students to, close those gaps is by being in school.
Right. And so what are you seeing, Trinette, sort of statewide? Is that something you're seeing in a lot of districts?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we had a variety of districts come back at different times, but I think the uncertainty is something that we all shared, and that ability to engage even through distance learning was really tough. I'm also a college professor, so I had definitely a couple years myself of the Zoom learning experience. And from the teaching perspective, it's really challenging. And from the student perspective, it's nearly impossible, when you're trying to learn new concepts. And some of our teachers and professors weren't tech savvy. The COVID didn't come with a, little trial period where everybody got to learn all of these software and all of the different channels that they needed to start using. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty. There is a lot of polarization on masking, on vaccines, on being in classrooms at all. So dealing with all of that has really gotten in the way of attendance and learning in a lot of places. So there's definitely a feeling that we need to get back to normal. And I think what Marie's doing is really helping not just that community, but I think it's throughout California. We see a lot of districts that are saying, okay, how do we get everybody back into classrooms focused on learning again?
Right, because that goes into, I mean, we always talk about audiences when we're figuring out what we're actually communicating and to whom. But so that means that this year's marketing campaign was different for a lot of reasons, and largely that audience, though the same people, they'd changed because they'd experienced collectively a pandemic. So like I know, Marie, you said your challenge of finding that balance.
Mm-hmm.
So, speaking some more about audiences, I know defining your audience is a key part of writing a communication plan, which Marie, you did for the first time for this campaign. Trinette, tell us a little bit about the CalSPRA Academy course that you just taught on developing that plan and why creating it so important.
Sure. The communication planning course came about because for several years we'd offered a PR boot camp, which is a really great first step. Like, we've had a lot of people come into the profession over the last few years. I think districts all over the country are realizing that communication is non-negotiable, that you really need to invest in that area or you're going to be in trouble, which a lot of districts were. So we had this PR boot camp. It was really great to get people started into learning basic PR concepts. But when we asked people, okay, what's the next step? What do you want to learn next? It was always, I need a communications plan. So our first one, we just launched in August, and we met once a month for about 90 minutes. And we followed basically the 4-step process as we were going through communication planning. And they had to identify audiences, they had to identify strategies, their work plan. And every single week they had some kind of like buildable assignment that would lead to the final plan. And then they would get personalized feedback from me. So we kept it at a small class size of about 25 people. And it was really fantastic. It was our first time, so you never know, how much engagement you're going to have, how committed people are going to be. But our CalSPRA members showed up, and they all really committed to getting that plan done in 1 month.
And now, Marie, you had said that it kind of perfectly aligned to the timing where you were working on this plan. Can you both tell us a little bit about that process and your process working together on the communication plan?
Sure. So I think as I was doing the course, I was taking in a lot, but I wasn't producing anything. And I'm usually not a procrastinator. So in my defense, it was the beginning of the school year. So everything was hitting at once. But and my goal was to develop this overarching, whole school communication plan for the year. And then I don't know why it just occurred to me. I was in the middle of meeting about this attendance campaign, and I'm like, you know what? I really should just use this template that is in our course when I'm meeting with student services, because it was hard for me to communicate to them. They had all kinds of ideas, but they couldn't articulate like who their audience was, like what our messaging was. And so I actually, broke out that template, and it's like, oh, what are our goals? What's our objective here? what what do we want to accomplish, and when is that time frame to be accomplished? So it really helped us kind of focus what we were trying to accomplish, and then the rest was pretty easy. I'm obviously able and adept at doing tactics as far as messaging and graphics and that type of thing, but it's all those other pieces that we sometimes forget. Like, what is our ultimate goal here? Who is our audience? What is our purpose? And so sometimes, I know even for me as a communicator, I'm jumping into tactics before I've really sat through and thought out all those other pieces that are so important to a successful campaign.
So did you feel that, and I mean, and just to back up a little bit, we know what the RPI is: research, planning, implementation, and evaluation, but maybe not everybody knows that. Speaking of that 4-step process, that's what we're referring to. But when we're talking about the tactics, that comes later, right? But what you were saying was that the objectives at the very top, defining that, really kind of helps steer conversations. How was that? I guess in those meetings, what was that like as far as helping other departments understand from a communication perspective what the asks might be like?
Yeah, I sometimes, and this is just like the story of my life, I sometimes get asked to do a lot of things where people are like, do this. I'm like, okay, well, what's the reason we're doing this? What's the purpose that we're doing this? And they kind of look at me like I'm crazy sometimes, and or why are you making my job hard? Or why are you making me try to do your job? And I was like, look, I just have to understand all the pieces. I can send a mass communication to 14,000 people in 2 seconds. But what is the outcome? What are we trying to desire? So that, I think it really made them understand by even just seeing the template, by understanding like, okay, wait, she's not crazy. This is something communication people do before they start sending phone calls to 14,000 people. They think about what they want to accomplish and how they're going to accomplish that. Then they get into, execution of that. And then, of course, speaking of RP, evaluation, then you think about, did that work? And that's obviously the part that's so hard with school, especially one person shop like me, is finding time to go back and evaluate, like, okay, we did this campaign in September. What worked? What didn't work? I can tell you already, I had feedback on my yard signs, which we can talk about later. They're like, you can't read it. I'm like, oh, that's the worst feedback you can tell me. But yeah, I mean, that's evaluation. That's important.
Exactly.
Next year, you can better believe that the font's going to be bigger, right? And so that's the one piece that we sometimes skip over.
Definitely. And I know, kind of going back to the research part, helping identify what your target audiences are and how they changed. I know you mentioned how in the past you had used pretty much the whole toolkit by the organization Attendance Works, which I know provides free toolkits to districts each year. But this year you did something a little different, and that was because you wanted to make sure that you were reaching your audiences the right way. Tell me a little bit about that.
Right. So first of all, I just want to make sure everyone understands that Marie Russell did not come up with "Stay connected, keep learning." So for the record, that is an Attendance Works slogan. I am not that creative, but in looking at their toolkit and their graphics, which they give you sample messaging, it just, for us, which is K-12 district, that some of the graphics imagery was more elementary focused. It also had like kind of a distance learning aspect to it, which we're way far away from. And so we utilized a different angle at that. And then I was actually just scrolling through Canva looking for ideas, and I came across this location marker, and I thought, well, this would look really nice when paired with this message of stay connected, keep learning. And then what we added to that was be here. So be here, stay connected, keep learning. So kind of that's how my brain works. Sometimes inspiration strikes in odd ways. And so we kind of have this unique logo that has it looks like a house. And so we incorporated our logo with the location marker. And at this point, we have posters in every classroom. We've been, putting messaging on social media. And then we also have these yard signs. Last week, I actually went to a taco truck who has our sign up in their taco truck, and I got some great tacos out of that. So that was, win-win. It was a win-win for me. But that's the other thing we do in our campaign is we enlist our community members to put these signs, put these yard signs at their businesses or in their yards. And that's a way to kind of get the community on board as well. Our community is great for wanting to promote and support our schools.
That's awesome. And I know you said that the inspiration comes out of nowhere, but let's give you some credit, because had you not been tuned into your community and your audience and knowing what it is that they are going to be receptive to versus what they're totally not going to want to see, which is more distance learning stuff, that's a big piece of the marketing. That's a big piece of all of this that I think also gets overlooked sometimes. And so kudos to you and making sure that is an element in your plan, in your communication plan. So you talked about the yard signs. So what else? I know social media as well was part of your plan. So what else was part of your marketing?
So for me, I was more focused at the district level. Of course, the most important thing is what's going on at the schools. So we're doing this, campaign, but they're doing the hard work of having those conversations, going and doing home visits. And so on the school side of the house, there's a lot of personal type connections. What we just give them is a frame around which to kind of, organize their own actions, right? So when they're going out and having these conversations, hey, have you seen, the campaign we're doing? We really are, want you to be here in TUSD. So I'm just helping the school kind of frame that out for all the messaging, more important messaging in some respects than what we're doing. They're having those personal one-to-one conversations every day with kids who are missing school, with parents who are, maybe not bringing their kids to school. And so we're all on the same team, and I'm just helping kind of set the stage for that.
But you made a good point. And Trinette, I think I saw your eyes perk up too, but when you said framing, you're like, yes, framing. Mm-hmm. That's what we do. Can you speak to that a little bit, Trinette? I know that's something that APRs talk about a lot too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just been exciting to hear Marie describe her process. When I provided this template, I thought, okay, this will be a great final product, but I had no idea that she would be using it as this discovery tool, right? As a way to frame the whole effort. So she brought it into her internal stakeholder groups, the groups that wanted this campaign to happen, and said, okay, yeah, we can make this happen. Who are our audiences? What are our key messages? And really use that as a tool to make sure that everyone was focused and on the same page. Because I think any PR person listening to this has had that experience where a department is like, yeah, we really need you to come in and do this video. We want to promote such and such. It's going to be amazing. And it's like, there's all these messages. Some are meant for parents, some are meant for students, some are meant for staff. It's just, we love the enthusiasm, but in order for something to be effective, it's got to be focused, right? You can't just like throw everything on the wall and say, okay, let's see what sticks, right? So it's just enormously satisfying to hear that this little, template, it's literally a Word doc, 2-page, maybe page and a half Word doc of all the things that you need to put into a final communication plan that Marie turned into a great new tool. I mean, certainly the next time that I teach the course, I'm gonna make you come and do like a guest lecture, Marie. We'll talk about your campaign.
Sounds good. I mean, truly, it's simple, but at the same time, it's, taking 10 minutes even to sit down and really think about something before you do it. I was just telling Trinette before we started that, there's a new interest in having a campaign around, what's going on with fentanyl in California, rainbow fentanyl that's coming across. And of course, everyone's like, yeah, everyone wants a video. That's always the first thing. We need a video. And then it's like, then we need graphics. It's like, okay, so again, I think it was really helpful to kind of frame that discussion, get everyone to, get off the video bandwagon for a second and really think about, what's the most effective way. Because even social media, our parents are and aren't on social media, right? So a lot of times people just think, oh, Marie, put it on social media. And I always think, well, who is supposed to read this? Is it our parents?
Right.
Okay, because we have 14,000 parents, and On Instagram, I have 7,000 people or followers, and I have about 7,000 on Facebook. They're not all our parents. So if you want our parents to read this, it needs to go through BB Comms, right? And yes, we can support and put stuff on social media, but just helping people understand like where the audiences are. They don't understand that. They just think, oh, every parent's on Facebook or on Instagram. It's like, no, everyone's in different places. And the bad news is a lot of them are on TikTok. I want nothing to do with TikTok, but that might be where I'm headed, because you're just always trying to, go where your parents are, your audience is. And for students especially, they're not on our Facebook. So when people tell me we want you to put that on Facebook for the kids to read, I'm like, that's going to be strike 3 right away, because they're not going to.
Maybe when they turn 30, they'll come back to Facebook
Right.
and go, oh,
That's
yeah.
right.
The other thing I want to point out that I loved about Marie's story is the way that it enhanced her credibility with the leadership team. For them to truly start to understand that communication is a field of study, that we all are professionals, that we think through and we're reflective about who we're trying to reach, what our messages are, how we're going to reach people. And I think that even if you don't get your APR, even if you just are starting to try to be more thoughtful about your work and ask better questions of your leadership team, it really will enhance your credibility if you push back a little bit on some of these requests and really try to get people focused on being impactful in their communication efforts.
Yes, just showing that intentionality of, like you said, Marie, just taking a beat and saying, but why? And for whom,
Right.
So I'm assuming that this is probably going to be a best practice you're going to be implementing in all your future efforts, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, to me, the one area that I want to continue to grow in is evaluation. And just, I'm not a numbers person. I know Trinette loves numbers. Matter of fact, I'll plug Trinette. She has written several books now and she loves data. She is data girl. Maybe we can ask her to give you those titles and information on those. But that is not my, jam. But I really would try to like to improve in that area and look at analytics and really dive into. I kind of have a general idea when a post is doing well, or man, that one really got a lot of likes. But as far as best time to post and all those types of things, I definitely have room for improvement in that area.
But even back to the yard signs, just that little bit of feedback, like you said, you can already see how that will influence next year, right?
There's always a story with the yard sign. So the last time I did this campaign, we kind of had like the hands raised, like students raising their hand. But when you put it in the ground, it looked like hands coming out of a grave. So I knew I wasn't going to do hands coming out of a grave, but I guess dropped the ball again on the font size. But
we're just going to call that learning and growing. And right. You didn't do the hands this year, and then next year.
It's like our campaign, keep learning, right? Keep learning.
Right. Have you gotten any other sort of evaluative feedback that that you're going to be able to put towards next year?
Yeah, I think people have been have liked the campaign. Some of the other things I didn't mention is that we're also kind of accompanying it with a social media what I miss kind of photo image where I'm showing like kind of engaging, fun pictures. I did just one today that had our NGRTC students. It had a teacher interacting with the student. I think I had a student, waving hi. So really high engagement, fun looking pictures. And then there's like a search box that says what I miss. And so this idea for kids, like, we want school to be a place obviously of learning, but it's their social connections as well. I even had a kid with pizza, some of it's where they eat. And so, we want kids to be here for all that, social emotional support, their food, their learning, all of it. We're here. And getting it at home is not going to be the same. It's just not going to be the same experience.
And going back to sort of that tagline, or I know talking to you before we met on the podcast, you were mentioning that was a phrase that you kept hearing. Was it the counselors or guidance counselors or people saying that this is what the kids were always saying, right? Is that how that influenced that particular graphic?
Well, actually, I threw that back way to the time when I was a teacher, and I was actually a teacher. And of course, the kids would always come in and say, "What I missed? Oh, nothing. We did nothing when you were gone. We waited for you to come back, and now we're starting. So thank God you're here." So of course they'd always say, "Or did I miss anything good?" No, not really. I mean, it's just a standard thing that I, as a teacher, would always get asked. So threw it back there, way back to like the '90s for that tagline.
And I
FYI,
think
they're
it's
still
still,
using it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And they're still always surprised when you actually did continue on. So,
what sort of engagement have you been seeing on those posts?
we've been getting some pretty good engagement. Like everything else, we always have so many campaigns going on. So our attendance campaign is coinciding with our Hispanic Heritage Month. It's coinciding with our Start with Hello Week, which we did a big push out. So um, I just think it's something that's just coming back as a reminder. So every few days, every week at least, we're doing a post, and we're trying to highlight our community support as well of our campaign. We want it to make sure that everyone understands this isn't just your teachers who want you to be here, although that obviously is very important, but our community wants you to be here. You belong here in school. We want you to learn. We want you to grow up and be productive citizens, and hopefully stay in Turlock and contribute, or get out and move away, but still contribute somewhere else.
And so I know that you can use, you basically can build a communication plan for a lot of the things that you're going to do in your role, but specifically talking about marketing, now that you've gone through this cycle, what would you do a little different for the next time in a communication plan?
Yeah, I mean, and you say next time is always the factor, right? And so in a perfect world, I would have time to do not only so much social media for this campaign, and obviously we're doing the yard signs, but also, every year they want us to do something in the movie theater. They want a video for the movie theater. That's like every year. Can we put a video in the movie theater? Having time to do maybe a video in the movie theater would be great, and everyone would be so excited. I don't know if people go to the movie theater anymore, but if they did, they would see our video. But also, building on our website, having some resources to point people to. I would like to, have all these different kind of places instead of just, social media. I would like to have time to have a full package of attendance resources for parents.
Very cool. All right, so Trinette, I know we've talked a little bit about the CalSPRA Academy, but for those folks who maybe aren't aware of the state chapters of INSPRA, I'm going to give you a second to kind of rep CalSPRA and share the benefits that school PR pros have when they belong to a state chapter.
Sure. And, even if you don't have a state chapter, because I know there's a lot of folks listening that may not have that advantage, NSPRA is a fantastic resource. There are so many, I mean, that's how we met, Molly. Like, it's such a wonderful place to connect with like-minded people. And this can be a really lonely job, right? You can feel like a one-person office like Marie has, that you're just, in this office working on your own thing, and nobody truly understands exactly what it is that you do. They only see that visible piece. If you're going back to RPI, they don't see the research, they don't see the planning, they don't see the evaluation. They see 1/4 of what it is that you do, just that implementation phase. That's the most visible part. And the state chapters, we really are supplementing the stuff that NSPRA offers to everyone. At CalSPRA, my background is in teaching. I teach at the local CSU. So when I got hired as executive director last year, I was like, okay, like I want to make sure that we're bringing all this new programming because that's my passion, right? How do we, it's not enough to just, we have a listserv. That's amazing. People support each other. We have a member library where people can get templates and checklists and things like that, so they don't have to start from scratch. But on top of that, I really want to arm people with the knowledge, the information, and the skills that they need to do this job effectively. And that means that, CalSPRA then expands the influence throughout the state rather than just the few select people that are lucky enough to be state chapter members. So I highly encourage anybody, to look up where your state chapter is, even when they're small. And by the way, CalSPRA is kind of big now. But when I was on the board in the, 2009 to 13 era, we were tiny, but we still really got a lot out of coming together with other colleagues in our same field, even if it was just to lean on each other. And the friendships, you know, it might seem secondary to your professional network, but the friendships I've developed through NSPRA and CalSPRA are lifelong. I mean, they're people that I will always be connected to. So I highly recommend connecting with your state chapter.
Anything to add to that, Marie?
Well, Trinette's too shy to plug her book, so I'm going to do it for her. So she has two books, I think two books, Engaging Data and The Communicating Principal. And I joked I'm very sad that she didn't interview me because I don't think she realized I was a principal for her book, but maybe her third book, maybe I'll get the interview. But these are very helpful resources. And obviously we have an NSPRA colleague that co-wrote the Communicating Principal. I don't know if Trinette wants to share that story, but those are great resources. And I'm so thankful that Trinette is in Sacramento, so she's nearby. So, you know, if I had to, I could get my car and drive there for assistance. But she's a great, and we're so excited to have her as executive director.
Awesome. And I know, like Trinette said, that's how I met all of you guys. I mean, both of you I met at INSPRAs, and I'm thrilled to still be part of that and bring more of the Rhodes branding crew out that way as well. So we end every podcast with the same question. And so I'm going to ask both of y'all, if you could wave a magic wand, what is one thing you would fix in education?
I'm going to let Trinette go first. I have to think, there's so many.
I think the biggest thing on my mind lately is the polarization and incivility, that it's just heartbreaking to see the educators and the educational leaders that are just pouring themselves into organizations, and then the distrust that's being sown from people who have no idea what education is really about, right? These third parties who are just using this cause, if you will, of misinformation to really pump themselves up politically and gain more power in the world. And at what cost? You know, I mean, I feel like when everybody is working together and everybody has students' interests at heart, there is nothing we can't accomplish. I've seen magic happen in school districts where there are teachers who are, you know, supported and engaged, and principals who have a vision, and school districts that truly support them. Like, kids can do anything. But right now, it's almost like we've got, you know, both hands tied behind our backs as we're trying to deal with all of this polarization and misinformation out there. So if I had a magic wand, I would, you know, wave it and make sure that everybody knows how amazing educators are.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And then the only thing I'll add is this year I'm kind of overseeing counselors. I'm also a former high school counselor. And so if I could wave a magic wand, I would ensure that every student could graduate college and career ready. Too many kids are still not doing that. And that would be my goal, is that every kid, when they leave high school, is ready for their future.
And attendance does play into that, does it not?
It does. Yes, it does.
Awesome. Well, ladies, thank you so much for your time today. If folks listening want to connect and follow your work, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter. I think Trinette and I are both trying to do a better job of being on Twitter. I post so much for my school district that I don't post as much as I could, but that is my professional account. So at F. Marie Russell on Twitter.
Perfect.
And if you Google Trinette Marquis, I think I'm the only one. So
in the world,
I think so. So it will bring you to my LinkedIn page and Twitter. And like Marie, I really want to like Twitter. I really do. But it just hasn't really like caught on for me. When I'm at conferences, I'll tweet all day long, and then it'll just be long periods of silence. But I'm happy to connect with folks. I love hearing from people and sharing resources.
I feel like there's a whole discussion about audiences there,
right?
Right. But for now, I will make sure to share your Twitter and if you have LinkedIn information with everybody else here. Thank you all so much for taking the time, and I hope to see you in California soon.
Thank you, Molly.
Thanks, Molly.